A solemn atmosphere enveloped a Florida funeral as loved ones gathered to bid farewell to wrestling icon Hulk Hogan, whose real name was Terry Bollea. Under a tent where shadows mingled with grief, rows of white chairs filled with those who knew him as a legend, a friend, or an inspiration stretched across the manicured lawn. This day, however, was not about the larger-than-life entertainer, but about Terry Bollea, the man, the husband, the father. At the heart of the gathering stood his wife, Sky Daly, visibly trembling yet resolved to deliver the most challenging speech of her life. The silence was profound, broken only by the gentle flutter of the nearby American flag. Sky gripped the lectern, her eyes scanning the faces in the crowd. His children, Brooke and Nick, red-eyed and stunned, wrestling legends like Ric Flair, Triple H, and Vince McMahon, all unusually subdued and marked by sorrow, and even The Undertaker, a silent, unmistakable silhouette at the back. The wrestling community had truly shown up to honor one of their own. Sky's voice, though tinged with deep emotion, resonated clearly as she began, "I never thought I'd have to do this, and I never imagined it would come this soon." Each word seemed to be infused with a memory, and her gaze briefly flickered to the casket behind her, simple yet regal, adorned with red and yellow flowers, the very colors that had become synonymous with his iconic persona. These were the colors that once blazed across television screens as millions watched a man of unmatched charisma effortlessly dominate the ring. But Sky wasn't speaking of the legend, she was addressing the man who had been her anchor through her darkest moments, who had made her late-night grilled cheese sandwiches when sleep eluded her, and who had filled her life with laughter through countless stories of travel mishaps and backstage antics that only she would ever truly know. "He was so much more than the man you saw in the ring," she articulated, her voice cracking with emotion. "He was my compass, my calm, my reason to believe that even in this crazy, loud, spotlight-drenched world, love could still be quiet and real." Tears welled in her eyes, but she made no attempt to hide them, wanting the world to witness that grief was not a sign of weakness, but rather love in its purest, most unfiltered form. She then shared the story of their first meeting, not with a sense of glamour, but with heartfelt honesty. "He was nervous," she recalled, a faint smile gracing her lips despite the pain. "You'd think Hulk Hogan didn't get nervous, but he did with me. He asked if I wanted a drink 3 times in 10 minutes and forgot what he was drinking himself." A collective, gentle chuckle rippled through the audience, a much-needed release amidst the profound weight of the moment. Sky allowed the laughter to linger, emphasizing, "He was human, and that's what made him a hero, not the muscles, not the fame, but the heart he carried under all of that." She spoke of their private moments, the quiet car rides where they discussed topics far beyond the realm of wrestling, where Terry openly confessed his fears about his legacy and the elusive nature of forgiveness, wondering if people would remember him for the right reasons. She described his unwavering devotion to his children, even when the cameras were off, how he would call Nick simply to express his belief in him, or leave Brooke lengthy voicemails filled with unrequested advice about music contracts and significant life choices. Terry was terrified that the world had seen him but not known him, Sky revealed, her voice now remarkably steadier. "But I'm here to tell you, the man you loved, he was exactly who you thought he was, just softer and funnier and more fragile than any of us really knew." A gentle gust of wind stirred through the tent, almost as if carrying his very presence. Sky placed her hand tenderly over her heart and whispered, "He's still here. He'll always be here." As the sun's rays pierced through the somber clouds, a single beam of light illuminated the casket, drawing every eye instinctively towards it. Sky looked at it too, her lips trembling into a soft smile. "I used to joke with him that he was the sun," she mused, "too bright, too loud, always burning. And now, even in death, he's still lighting us up." A moment of profound silence followed, allowing the crowd to fully absorb the depth of the loss, not merely of a wrestler, but of an entire era, a powerful force, a man whose voice had become an indelible part of countless childhoods. He was the man who had instilled in millions the belief that vitamins, prayers, and self-belief could truly transform the world. Sky continued, her tone now more intimate, as if reading from a personal letter meant only for him. "You gave everything, Terry. Your body, your time, your soul. You never knew how to slow down. You carried pain in places no one could see. You smiled through surgeries. You traveled when you should have rested. You loved this world, this business, even when it broke your heart." A gasp escaped her lips, unfiltered, and she momentarily covered her face. The crowd remained motionless, no one daring to interrupt the profound moment. "And now," she declared after a long, stabilizing breath, "you rest. And we carry you." In the stories we'll tell, in the music we'll hear, in the echoes of every fan who will chant your name when they remember what it meant to believe. Sky's gaze drifted upward, as if towards the heavens, her tears now flowing freely. I will love you forever. Not because you were famous, not because you were Hulk Hogan, but because you were mine, you were my Terry. A pause followed, the weight of her words hanging in the air, rich with meaning, impossible to dismiss. Then, without any prompting, the crowd slowly rose to their feet, one by one, in reverent silence as Sky descended from the podium. A palpable hush enveloped the tent, but it was not an empty silence, it was filled with love, with remembrance, with every facet of what the Hulkster had given, not just to the world, but to the woman who now had to navigate life without him. Sky returned to her seat, where she was embraced by a warm, tearful hug from Brooke and Nick. For a brief moment, as the casket was prepared for the final blessing, a familiar chant began softly in the distance. Hogan, 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 not shouted, but whispered, reverent, almost like a prayer. It was no longer about the wrestling legend, it was about the man they loved, the man Sky had just brought to life one final time. Moments later, a pastor approached the pulpit, his voice low and calming, offering verses of solace and the promise of eternal peace. Yet, the echo of Sky's heartfelt words still resonated. Even as the crowd bowed their heads, many were not praying to God, but to memory, to the hope that somehow, in some way, they could hold on to him a little longer. Sky remained seated, her head bowed, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. But within her heart, a storm of memories raged. She could hear his laugh, the way he would playfully tease her about always being the tough one. She pictured him hunched over his phone, meticulously reading fan messages, tears welling in his eyes when a letter arrived from a child battling cancer, stating that he was their reason for fighting. She remembered his hands, those enormous, calloused, world-famous hands, gently brushing her hair behind her ear when she cried at night, whispering reassurances that everything would be okay. But at that moment, nothing felt okay. As the pastor concluded and the choir prepared to sing, Sky rose once more, unexpectedly, instinctively. She walked back to the front, and the choir fell silent, all eyes turning to her. She wiped her eyes and softly said, "There's one more thing I need to say." Silence enveloped the space again. She turned to the casket and spoke, not to the crowd, but directly to him. "You always said you weren't perfect. That the world saw Hulk Hogan, but not Terry. That you made mistakes, that you didn't always get it right." Her voice broke again, but this time there was a quiet strength behind it. "But you did get it right. You loved me, and I loved you. That's the only truth that matters now." A ripple of tears spread across the faces in the crowd. "And if you're up there listening, babe," she whispered, "I forgive every mistake. I cherish every kiss, and I promise I'll keep going. Not because I want to, but because you'd want me to." She stepped down for the final time, her heart shattered, her spirit exhausted, but her soul finally at peace. She returned to her seat just as the choir began their rendition of Amazing Grace, the first few notes carrying like fragile feathers on the wind. Somewhere in the back, an old wrestling fan clutched a poster, not of Hulk Hogan body-slamming Andre, but of Terry hugging a child backstage. It wasn't the legend people cried for, it was the man behind the legend. As the final note resonated through the air and pallbearers, including fellow wrestlers and close friends, prepared to carry him away, Sky stood once more. She walked behind them, her hand never leaving the side of the casket. Step by step, she accompanied the man she loved, the man she had just eulogized with trembling courage and unwavering love, to his final resting place. But before the casket was placed into the hearse, she leaned forward, gently pressed her lips to its lid, and whispered just loud enough for those nearby to hear, "You're free now, my love. Rest easy, and save me a place right next to you." As the hearse slowly departed from the chapel, escorted in a solemn formation by security and family, the silence that followed was not hollow, it was sacred. The crowd remained still, their eyes tracking the vehicle as if it carried not just a body, but decades of memories, joy, pain, resilience, and history. Sky watched it go until the last glimmer of chrome disappeared beyond the garden hedges. She didn't cry then, the tears had already come and gone in unpredictable, fierce waves. What settled now was something deeper, a quiet, aching stillness that echoed inside her like the fading roar of a once thunderous crowd. This was no longer about ceremony, it was about carrying on. She turned to re-enter the chapel hall, where mourners had begun to drift into small groups, their whispers of shared memories rippling through the space. Some spoke of WrestleMania 3, others recalled backstage moments, goofy pranks, or quiet acts of generosity. Yet, None of these conversations carried the drama of stardom, they were all rooted in the profound humanity of the man. In a quiet corner, Sky sat beside Ric Flair, who wiped his face with a handkerchief and offered her a nod that conveyed more than words ever could. The two had known each other through the decades of wrestling's most electrifying era, but today, they were simply survivors of a generation now gently fading into legend. "He was proud of you," Rick said hoarsely. "You made him better." Sky squeezed his hand. "He made me believe in something again." Nearby, Triple H leaned against a wall, silent and still, his eyes bloodshot, holding a funeral program between his fingers. On the cover was a photograph not of Hogan in the ring, but of Terry Bollea laughing on a beach, barefoot, windswept, his arms wrapped around Sky as the sun set behind them. That was the man they had buried today, not the icon, but the devoted husband. Nick and Brooke conversed with small groups of close friends and relatives, their faces etched with strain. Brooke clutched a pendant Hogan had given her years ago, a tiny cross that now seemed far heavier than its chain. Nick, quiet and withdrawn, kept glancing towards the back doors as if expecting his father to walk through, flashing a grin and telling everyone to stop crying, to keep their chins up, brother. And yet, despite the overwhelming sadness, there was something sacred in that chapel. As stories flowed and tears were shared, it became clear that the man they had buried would never truly be gone, not from the hearts of those who knew him, loved him, and believed in the gospel of Hulkamania. A slideshow played silently in one corner of the room, childhood photos, early wrestling shots, tender moments with his children, and candid clips with Sky. One photograph, in particular, made Sky pause. Terry holding their dog in one arm and flipping pancakes with the other, wearing an apron that proudly declared